Hello, nonprofit rock stars and heroes. This is Tom Check with Greater Impact Consulting, where we help you streamline Salesforce for your nonprofit so that you can focus on creating impact in your communities. And today we are continuing the discussion about automation. In the last video, we talked just really broadly about what is automation and why is it important for your nonprofit. Today we're going to start to really look at what does automation look like in the Salesforce environment. So in your CRM, what are the different ways that we automate things? And I really like to start broad in this video and just identify kind of the key systems that Salesforce talks about automation in, and then some other systems that I always view as automation that I think are important to recognize. So when we think about how Salesforce views automation, there's really three systems that they're using that you're going to be interacting with. And then there's a fourth system that you probably won't interact with. So the first system is the oldest. It's called workflow rules. If you go into your setup as system administrator and you type in the quick find box workflow rules, you'll get a response. And workflow rules are kind of, like I said, they're the oldest way that Salesforce built automations from a user-generated point of view, a way that you as the administrator could build your own automations. And they were fantastic back in the day. They allowed you to do a lot of things, but they were also fairly limited because they were kind of, well, they were young, just like Salesforce was. And so the important thing to know about workflow rules is that it's not recommended that you build your current automations in them. You don't want to build workflow rules if you can help it. But it's also really important to know about them because some of the automations that are already running in your org are built in workflow rules. So some of Nonprofit Success Pack's automations are built in workflow rules because when Nonprofit Success Pack came around, that's the best system they had. So stuff like acknowledgement letters are going to happen in workflow rules. Also, if your organization's been using Salesforce for a while, it's almost guaranteed that administrators at some point in the history of your organization built their automations in workflow rules. And that's important to know because if you need to edit, modify, delete, or update those automations, you have to go through workflow rules to identify where they are. So that's the first system. It's called workflow rules. The next system is called process builder. And this is the one that for most kind of what we would generally term accidental admins, right? The people who don't have a bunch of training in Salesforce. When you want to go in and create an automation, Process Builder right now is probably your best bet. And it's your best bet because it's really understandable. It's visual. It's kind of like a flow chart. You're starting to see like this happens, this is the criteria, then these things happen. If, then the next criteria and these actions happen. So it's a little bit more visual, it's a little bit more easily understood, and it's a lot more powerful than workflow rules. It can do more than workflow rules can do. So we've got workflow rules, we've got process builder. That's where you're going to build most of your automations right now, at least. This is 2021. The next one is called flow. And flow or flow builder is where Salesforce is currently investing most of its energy from a user-generated automation standpoint. So this is where they are putting a bunch of their development efforts to build up flows so that it is easier to use. Right now, if you're not used to building flows and you haven't gone through a bunch of trailheads on it, it's going to feel pretty foreign. The way that flows work is you have input variables, and then flow is its own kind of environment that you can design what happens in that environment, and then you can make it so that things happen, so you get outputs. So it's a little different than Process Builder in that way, in that it's you have to think about it as its own separate environment, and there's a lot more understanding of variables and how variables work. So it's a little bit more training intensive, it's a little bit more knowledge intensive to use flow. But it is really valuable, especially when you want to do some really complex things. So when you work with a consultant, most likely if you're asking them to automate things, there's a really good chance that they're going to build them in flow because it can do more than Process Builder. And the last system that Salesforce thinks about with automation is what's called Apex. And Apex is coding. Apex is actually its own language that developers will use on the back end to design automations. It's not as visible to you as the accidental admin, and it's not very easy to edit or to update for you as the accidental admin. So that's kind of where Apex is really incredibly powerful. It can do just about anything, and it's kind of what Salesforce is built on. But for you as an end user or an end user admin, it's not going to be very usable or functional to try and create Apex or to edit existing Apex in your organization without going through some extensive training and doing a lot of trail mixes on how Apex works, which is probably not where, as a small nonprofit, you want to invest your training time. But it's really important to know that that is running in the background, because a lot of how Nonprofit Success Pack works, program management module, a lot of those things are built on Apex. And so the automations aren't easily editable by you, and that's by design. So those are the 4 major systems that Salesforce thinks about when we consider automation. There's a couple other things that I like to throw out there for nonprofits. We talked about this in another video, but reports and subscribing to reports or dashboards is another form of automation, right? Making sure that every Monday you get a copy of the report in your email, or that every day the first thing you log into shows you a visual dashboard of what's going on in your organization. That's a type of automation we don't always think about, but is really important for all organizations, but especially for small nonprofits. And another one is just kind of that data export that we've talked about in the past, making sure that once a month your data is automatedly, through automation, is backed up and sent to your email so that you just click on a link, download, and you're ready to go. So making it so that you don't have as much manual steps to get through those kinds of things. And then some other stuff like engagement plans, if you're using Nonprofit Success Pack, allow you to automate task creation, and they're really editable, really easily editable by end users. So that's a way to automate tasks if you use tasks, which I would highly recommend you do, to look into for Salesforce as well. So that's where we'll stop today's video. In the next couple of videos, we're gonna dive deeper into those 3 main automation systems that you're going to be interacting with as an administrator: workflow rules, process builder, and flow. We're not going to do a video on Apex because that's kind of outside the scope of what your administration is probably going to be looking at. And we'll probably dive into a little bit more around engagement plans, because those are really useful for a lot of nonprofits. So that's all I've got for you today. I wish you the best of luck in starting to automate your systems in your organization, and keep up the awesome work of making meaningful impact in your communities. Until next time.